Um, you know what? Perhaps before I start this, I should get my Rain Total Body Fuel. Shouldn't I? I probably should, right? I'm very low energy. Yeah, kind of sad. Okay, I'm gonna get my Rain Total Body Fuel. I'm amazed you hadn't already. Yeah, well, that's it. I had a Diet Coke. I had a Diet Coke so far, but now I think I'm ready to. I need that 180 milligrams of naturally sourced caffeine. Thank you, Lodane. Have some cake and get a sugar bump. I don't think that's how it works. I think I more just get the sugar crash. I skip the bump and I head straight to the crash. This whole 2 hour low energy segment was just a setup for this ad. That's right. I'm lulling you into a false sense of security with my like low energy drawl. It's all part of the power of suggestion. Is Rob really going to act like the Nazis didn't disband after World War II again? Because technically, rum-ba-dum-bum-bum-bum. That's right. That's what it sounds like when people start saying that to me. It just devolves into that like Peanuts. The adults on Peanuts. Technically. I went away from. I heard the wildest noises from here. Yeah, I was just watching a weird Godzilla cartoon that my son is obsessed with. Sorry. Hang on one sec. I'm gonna get my beverage. You're gonna once again be subjected to my dad fit. Okay. Bit of a crisis here. Bit of a crisis. I didn't have a cold rain. I didn't have a cold rain. I had to go to the closet and get new ones. And it's probably fine. It's obviously fine. It's chilled. But I really needs to be that cold temperature. So what I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to do. I don't want to put ice. What I'm going to do is just go upstairs, put these in the fridge, and I'm going to put one in the freezer. And you can't let me forget. I'm going to put one in the freezer. I'm going to come back down, and then I'm going to go get it in like 10 minutes. 10 minutes max. Maybe like 15. My 4-year-old just came in and started talking to you, Rob. What's up, buddy? How's it going? Your dad is getting older now. You have to give him time to rest, okay? Sometimes he needs time to relax. I know you don't understand this, but this is important. It's difficult being older like this. We can't always be running after you and picking you up and doing all that kind of stuff. You have to start to learn to be independent, okay? I know you're just a little kid, but you have to learn about this stuff. Dads need time. They need to have their own space sometimes. It's important. Wrap it in a wet paper towel. What? What is this? What is this wet paper towel thing? Is that a thing? Does that make it... It helps it get cold faster. Very interesting. I might just try this. Okay, give me one moment. Give me one moment. I'll be right back, all right? It's not my department.
Well, speaking of bombs, what is it that makes America the world's greatest nuclear power? And what is it that will make it possible for us to spend $20,000 million of our taxpayers' money to put some idiot on the moon? Well, it was the great, enormous superiority of American technology, of course, as provided by our great American scientists, such as Dr. Werner von Braun.
Guy Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual. I found this.
Is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmazi, says Werner von Braun. Don't say that he's hypocritical. Say rather that he's apolitical. Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun. Some have harsh words for this man of renown, but some think our attitude should be one of gratitude, like the widows and cripples in old London town, who owe their large pensions to Werner von Braun. You too may be a big hero once you've learned to count backwards to 0. In German or English, I know how to count down. And I'm learning Chinese, says Werner von Braun.
You can count on me and my good old blog to talk you through all this. Octo Squiddies, thank you for the 2 months of Tier 1. Did we just get a raid? Oh my goodness. Sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. We just got a majority report raid. I'm sorry I was not there. I apologize. I was just going to put my energy, my rain total body fuel, throwing that in the freezer so I can make sure it's nice and chilled. I need some energy. I'm very lethargic today. It was my birthday yesterday, and it's still my birthday today, as is described in the title. I got maybe a little bit tipsy last night while watching The Big Lebowski. I'm feeling a little lethargic, so I want to get my energy drink. My Rain Total Body Fuel, proud sponsors of this stream. And it was still kind of room temp, which is that's not what I need right now. 2:45. Okay. So, Majority Report, Raiders, thank you so much for joining the stream. Thank you. Sorry that I was not there. I was just putting on this Werner von Braun song because we're talking about Operation Paperclip. I poked a little bit of a hornet's nest yesterday, talking about post-war history, post-World War II history, and the sort of U.S. Nazi alliance. A number of folks didn't really appreciate that I was bringing this stuff up. People got very upset at me over this. A lot of it was over this pedantic annoying technicality about the way I worded the tweet, even though everyone fucking knew exactly what I was talking about. That was the majority of the people that were commenting on it. Just these weird pedants who were pretending not to understand the point so they could, like, I don't know why, score some point. Yeah, they just didn't exist after 1945. That's right. They just ceased to exist. That's correct. According to many people, apparently people actually believe this. So, the link I posted sums up the commentators. What's the link? Destiny fans talking. This is apparently what was going on. This is me yesterday. Or the day before. As soon as they say technically, this is all I hear after. Yeah, except this is like enjoyable. This is actually enjoyable though, so that's the one difference. That's the main difference. So yeah, everyone, we spent a lot of the day yesterday talking about Operation Paperclip and von Braun and all the different Nazis that were put back in charge of post-war Germany, Western Germany, NATO. The way that there's a very coherent connection between politically between Canada and the United States prior to the war and Nazi Germany, and then also in the post-war period, and just kind of making these sort of connections and talking about Operation Paperclip obviously is the main part of that. And what we were doing, at the end of the stream, we started watching this lecture by Annie Jacobson about Paperclip, and it's really, really well done. I really enjoyed just watching the first 10 minutes, so then we were planning on taking the rest of the afternoon to learn a bit more about this stuff, because this lecture is really, really interesting, and she's got some really cool historical images and stuff that we don't see a lot. The Annie Jacobson Area 51 book is really good too. One of the conclusions she comes to at the end of the book is that the dirty secret that was protected on these military bases was not alien tech, but human experimentation involving Operation Paperclip scientists, and that these experiments continue to this day. Fuck, that does sound interesting. That does sound very interesting, especially in the context of all the alien stuff we're hearing about lately, right? This kind of like sudden deluge of admissions seemingly from the United States government that there's like these unexplained alien phenomena that they've been following now for some time. I wonder if there's any kind of connection there, because that's probably is mostly being used as an excuse for further funding and further billions of dollars for these exact like weapons manufacturers and defense companies. Read the book. Apparently they use mentally challenged people as test experiments. I will read it. That sounds very interesting and disturbing, but interesting. And listen, I was talking with Colin Sutherland Wilson on my podcast about the legacy of Indigenous people in Canada at these like Indian hospitals being experimented on in the same way. Talk about a connection between the foundation of our nation and the Nazis and the continuation. We were doing this kind of human experimentation on Indigenous people. The Nazis took that to the extreme, and what Annie Jacobson seems to be arguing is that like once the Nazis joined the United States government, it got absorbed into the United States government, it seems like they were keeping up with a lot of that same disturbing shit. Very disturbing. America's a country where the absolute best case scenario would be experimentation on aliens. That's right. By the way, Raiders, before we get started, I don't want to do the whole spiel. Yesterday was very good with the donations and stuff. As you can see, it is day 2 of my birthday, though. It is true. Please subscribe to the channel if you have if you got a spare Prime sub. Join the Friendship Triangle. This is what this community is all about. As you can see, it's just like there's nothing scammy about it. It's not a cult. It's not a multi-level marketing scheme. It's just like a community of different friends.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Oh my goodness. Sea of Noise, thank you for the 100 friend coin. And thank you, King.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
There it is, yeah. Thank you so much, King Uendo, for gifting another 5 subs as well. I can't get that notification to work properly. It's driving me crazy every time it happens, but I appreciate it. Oh, Pissed, converted into a tier 1 sub. Very kind of you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And thank you, Cape Codmunist, as well, for gifting a sub. Oh, boy. I'm mostly kidding, but under Wernher von Braun, the astronauts were white, blue-eyed Aryan types, and only after his death did the U.S. launch a black astronaut into space. You're mostly kidding, but I think we should probably explore that. I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence. At what level of the Friendship Triangle do members get branded? We're waiting until we do that's when we move into phase 2.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you very much, Pissed, for gifting another sub as well. That's when we move into phase 2. And Freudian slip again. That's when we move into phase 2. Once I'm in that Tim Pool position that I can get a whole compound. Once the quarantine's all finished.
We simply
We're all gonna
use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
The text-to-speech. Sorry, I have to do it. Thank you, Lodane, for the friend coin. This is a test bid alert, and shout out to the Chaos Zone, for they are my people. That's right, the Chaos Zone. Many people are perfectly happy being in that Chaos Zone. Many people are comfortable there. Does every building in this compound have to be a triangle? What's the big... in Midsummer, the big building where they do the ritual. It could be like this kind of a thing, I think. This is you showing up to your first day at the new compound. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing bad's going to happen. Oh, wait, sorry. I didn't realize it's still on there. See? This is you. This is the life that awaits you. So this is a better... Nothing bad or weird is going to happen there. It's just like a place where the community can go hang out. Nothing weird or bad about it. Don't worry about it. That's the movie where everyone had a great summer. That's right. I didn't catch the end, but I kind of had it on in the background. From what I understand, though, that's what it was. Everyone just had a nice time visiting and eating food and dancing and stuff, wearing flowers. Wonderful. Wonderful. Mountain climbing, foraging. Very nice people. Lovely community. So this is going to be this is the hype house. This is going to be our hype house. You should have done the whole Tim Pool thing yesterday with debating Destiny. Remember when you refused to debate Sam Seder unless it was in person in his studio, maskless, in the middle of the pandemic? Yeah, that's right. I should need to set these boundaries. If he physically comes to this basement, then I'll consider it. The Cloud House. I like that. Yeah. This is where we're going to go. Time to see what hemorrhages viewers faster. TPRK Apologia. Triangular community schemes or Operation Paperclip. That's always funny. This is, again, and as I've said many times, this is how you know I'm not a grifter, right? Hundreds of people show up to watch this channel, and I'm the first thing that comes to my mind is like, now let's talk about how I think North Korea is actually
You can count
not
on
that
me.
bad.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hey, thank you, Prog Dragon. Thank you for gifting 2 subs. Very kind of you, Prog Dragon. Thank you. Well, I think we got 10% more of this hype train, this friendship train. I don't think we can make this. It's okay if we don't. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Very chill vibes on the stream today. I'm not gonna.
You can count on me.
shame
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Prog Dragon, you're a little bit late. Thank you so much. You were supposed to be exempt from that because you had just donated a sub. You should have been exempt from that. But thank you very much. I actually do kind of like these new emotes. These new hype train emotes are actually kind of cool. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, folks. I am going to go and get my energy drink. I'm going to go get it now.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hey, Schick, thanks for gifting 3 subs. We hit the sub goal, everybody. That's so cool. Thank you so much to A Schick. And actually, I'm gifting 5 subs. You know what that means? Where are you? You just moved out of the chaos zone, moved into the elite level, and that is, of course, where the patented trickle-down clout system, that is where it's most concentrated, up at that elite level. So congratulations to you, A Schick. In all seriousness, though, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Prog Dragon, again. Okay. So I'm going to get my beverage, and we're going to watch the stuff about Operation Paperclip. And in fact, you know what I'll do is I'm just going to rewind a few minutes, and I'll let it play from where we left yesterday. I'll just go back a few minutes.
And you have prisoners being used for Operation Ship. And these papers that I looked at were remarkable because they're just a sort of seemingly benign correspondence between scientists. The apartment belonged to a doctor named Dr. Eugen Hagen, once a temperate man, worked in the United States on a Rockefeller Foundation scholarship. And Hagen was writing to Himmler and saying, of the 100 prisoners you sent me, a group of them died in transport. Please send more. And this is a terrifying moment for Operation Alsace because they realize that the Reich is experimenting on humans from the concentration camps to push medical science in a manner that cannot be pushed if you're experimenting on rabbits and guinea pigs. So Dr. Blum and Dr. Schreiber are now on the top of the target list for Operation Alsace and ultimately Paperclip. There you have Hitler and Goering, and of course the third horrible triad of this group of folks who are in the target eye of the Allies is Himmler. And Himmler is overseeing a vast network of state-sponsored slavery. And it's the slaves from the concentration camps that are assembling the weapons. So you have prisoners being experimented on for some of the programs, and you have prisoners being used to build rockets and such for the other weapons programs. As we're moving across Germany, all across the Reich, the Allies are coming across hidden troves of treasure like this. This is a famous photograph of gold, but also in these caves, Allies are finding documents and they're finding weapons. And this is one example. This little innocuous-looking entrance is actually the entrance to Nordhausen, which was the underground tunnel facility where Werner von Braun, General Dornberger, and many other scientists who would later come to America are working to build the rockets for the Reich. So
there's the link. There's the link if anyone wants it. I'm just going to crack open my Rain Total Body Fuel. Honestly, it seems it's cold. It's cold. I think I probably I could have left it another 5 minutes. I don't think it's quite the level of chilled that I was hoping for, but this is going to have to do. Anyway, cheers, everyone. Chin chin. And thank you to Rain Total, proud sponsors of the stream, the only communist energy drink company on planet Earth. Rain Total Body Fuel. Okay. Now I'm good to go.
You see down on the bottom photograph, those are train tracks. The rocket parts would go in, the slave laborers would build them, and out of the tunnels on those trains would come V2 rockets and body parts. This is the V2 rocket. So one of our teams was sent in. These men were sent to capture 100 rockets and to ship them back to the United States so that we could fly them here at the White Sands missile range. But this is where you really see Operation Paperclip begin, because also at the same time you have the scientists, and you see that an intelligence officer, the program sort of begins in bits and pieces, and one intelligence officer says, we have the rockets, but how about the scientists? This is von Braun, this is Dornberger, and two others who I write about in Paperclip. What's left out of the issue is that Dornberger, you can see here, he's with Himmler. They're both wearing leather coats. I find this photograph remarkable. I was not able to get permission to publish it in my book. I'm happy to show it to you here. General Dornberger went on and became a very important part of the Paperclip program. He worked for Bell Aircraft for years. He had one of the highest clearances at the Pentagon. He was a recruiting officer for Paperclip.
And remember, we pointed this out yesterday. Worth pointing out again, though. Bell Aircraft. Staff, the book is called Paperclip, I believe. Bell Aircraft prominently employed this guy Dornberger, former Nazi. Bell Aircraft, who had access to basically unlimited defense contracts throughout the Vietnam War, which was, you could argue, deliberately prolonged and intensified by a number of people in the U.S. national security establishment, but predominantly Allen Dulles. Nazi sympathizer Allen Dulles. Once you start making these links, it becomes very difficult to start to ignore this shit.
And nothing was ever mentioned of his past, and this photograph was certainly kept hidden for a rather long time. Arthur Rudolph, George Rickey, and Dornberger, those are all their Paperclip photographs. Part of what I write about in the book is how the
Dornberger had the gold Nazi Party badge, which meant he had personal favor from Hitler, same guy that ran Bell Aircraft. Rumored that Dulles wanted to make a separate peace deal with the Nazis and just get rid of Hitler. Yeah, and this is what we talked about this yesterday. Dulles ensured that the Nazis didn't unconditionally surrender. Literally helped evacuate a prominent SS general who was being cornered by Italian partisans. Went behind FDR's back to make a deal with the Nazis at the end of the war. And may have possibly been discovered and charged with treason had FDR not passed away. And then when there was a president that got in there that at first started doing what these guys said, what the intelligence community said in the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, I guess got kind of turned off from this crew and allegedly wanted to wind down the Vietnam War, wanted to end the Cold War and work with the Soviets. And lo and behold, he got fucking airholed in Dallas. In what you might argue was kind of a military coup. Kind of a weird coincidence, isn't it?
U.S. military was complicit. And this is a great moral conundrum because we were complicit in needing these scientists to be put forth as the good Germans, as the benign scientists who somehow were hiding out from the Reich.
Bullshit.
But of course we know from the photograph with General Dornberger that is a fiction. And for example,
is Friday just JFK Friday now? It's just, you can't, it's so unavoidable. If you're talking about the post-war history, like the JFK assassination is one of the turning points when America decisively went in this very specific direction. It was maybe kind of up in the air, and that was the moment where the generals and the NatSec types and the intelligence community, that's the moment that they had full control over the foreign policy of the United States. After that moment. So it's just unavoidable if you're going to talk about the post-war history, especially when you look at these connections that Dulles had with the Nazis and the way that the Nazis were fucking infested in the CIA and the national security establishment. And the president wasn't letting them do every single thing they wanted. They wanted to invade. They wanted to invade Cuba. They wanted to fucking invade Vietnam and escalate the Vietnam War. And what have I said many times as well? Looking at Vietnam, the quagmire of Vietnam, whether you think America lost that war or not, and obviously in terms of the actual war objectives, they did lose. But in terms of the objectives of just having a unlimited money printing machine that went to several prominent defense contractors, such as Bell Aircraft, staffed by a prominent Nazi, you kind of have to wonder, like, damn, these people really did quite well during this period, didn't they? And that's why you just can't avoid making these connections. Wasn't JFK just a standard lib? I think that's a good way of framing it, ephemeral friends. And this is the whole JFK conspiracy kind of hinges on whether you believe this idea that he wanted to pull out of Vietnam and he wanted to end the Cold War. Some people believe that, and some people believe that that's bullshit. I don't know where you land on that. The last time we spoke about this, and it is JFK Friday now again. The last time we spoke about this, I think I can kind of understand how he becomes president. He follows what the generals and what the intelligence community tell him to do in Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam. After Bay of Pigs and the whole Cuban strategy failed, and after he could clearly see where Vietnam was going, it doesn't mean that he was this great guy or anything, or he was this peacenik. But I find it's fairly convincing that he could look at these failures and look at the people that were influencing these decisions and these guys that wanted him to escalate all these things and just being like, no, these guys are screwing with my whole legacy. Like, even from like a lib perspective, even from like a cynical, if he's just JFK, if he's just thinking about his own legacy and his own like the history, had the way he's going to be remembered by history. He's just like, well, these people are just keep steering me into these fucking disasters. So their buddies in Bell Aircraft and all these defense companies can all profit from it. And I keep getting humiliated on an international level because of what I'm following these guys' advice. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch to be like, hey, maybe he wanted to go in a different direction after that. And that's when back and to the left. Oswald is behind him, by the way. Lee Harvey Oswald, he's in the car, he's waving. According to the official story, Oswald is like a click in that direction, shooting him here. Right? He's behind him. When you watch the video, it's very clear that he does not get shot there. He gets shot there. He goes back and to the left. That it's a joke at this point. It's like a meme because it's in the movie JFK. Back and to the left. The magic bullet. It went right around. It went past him, went right around, went all the way back around. Back and to the left. The Bill Hicks one is good, yeah. No fucking way. Yeah. There's also stuff JFK did, like the Peace Corps and funding reformers in Latin America. Even if it was to combat communism, it was a non-violent form. Yeah, it's just I think he was trying to champion a different approach to this stuff than what the intelligence community was saying and what the national security types were saying. Did you know that JFK's boat had a bell on it engraved with the phrase WWG1 WGA? This is not true. It made its way into one of Michael Flynn's lawsuits against the media institutions that have wrote critically about his connections to QAnon. That's funny. You must have learned that from Parler. And that's how you know QAnon is a psyop too, because they're talking about this very real phenomenon about the Kennedy assassination, how that was clearly a fucking a coup. And it's all done in defense of the exact same people. They want the intelligence community guys to like be in charge, the psychos, because they're the ones that are running this up, using the reality of the conspiracy to twist it into this alternate thing to go after people they don't like. Paperclip laid the foundation for the JFK assassination. That's right. Human rights as a concept was the Carter admin's innovation on that same liberal resistance to communist advancement. That's true, film fan. And also Carter had a different approach to that stuff as well. And what happened with the whole Iranian hostage crisis? Remember that? How that was prolonged intentionally in order to ensure that Reagan would win that election, and that Carter would be blamed for it and be destroyed. Who were the people again that were controlling that stuff? The Iranian hostage crisis? Wasn't it the United States intelligence community at that time? At that time, a prominent figure from that intelligence community, George W. Bush, son of Nazi sympathizer Prescott Bush. Weird. It seems like every time there's these big events, the same fucking people are there responsible for it. Okay, let's do that, Lodane. Next week we'll do some more JFK stuff. That sounds good. Isn't that a weird coincidence, though? And what's just another one of the... When you start looking at this stuff, this Operation Paperclip stuff, and putting together this timeline, you start noticing all kinds of crazy coincidences like that, don't you? You start noticing all these crazy coincidences. Very strange. And this is a conversation for another time. One thing also that's strange, though, is after the end of the Cold War, which we've examined, was a unlimited money printing machine for these like defense contractors. The Cold War ends in the early 90s, and they're kind of like, they don't really have this enemy to fight anymore. Well, what happened then? Another crazy coincidence. Lo and behold, there was a terrorist attack in the United States committed by some of the very people that were being funded by the CIA in the 80s to fight Soviets in Afghanistan. And this terrorist attack, wouldn't you know it, gave once again carte blanche to the national defense community and all these weapons contractors and military types to just go fucking hog wild once again for the next 20 goddamn years. Isn't that another crazy coincidence? There's just, when you start examining this stuff, there's so many of these crazy coincidences that you start to notice. Very strange. Yeah, 9/11 truthing is probably the worst thing you can do for your view count. I'm not doing it. I'm not suggesting anything. All I'm doing is pointing out that timing of that was very convenient for these weapons manufacturers and intelligence community guys, which then got a blank check from the US government, got a blank check from the United States government to create all these new intelligence agencies, Homeland Security, ICE, just a blank check from the most powerful government in the world, the wealthiest government in the world. They got a blank check to just like take all this and create all these new agencies, create a whole new federal bureaucracy, more weapons contracts. Hypothetically, what is the argument you could make about 9/11 being an inside job? So we're talking about also, like, I think any big conspiracy of the last several decades, the UFO conspiracy, the 9/11 truth movement, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of these conspiracy movements are infested with feds because they want it to sound crazy and unhinged. And they want anyone that starts asking any questions about this stuff to be lumped in with this group of like crazies. That's why I think like Alex Jones and shit like that. Like I think these people are feds. Yeah. No, people they want this. They want people to, if you start asking questions about September 11th. You can count on me.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
See, it kills my viewer count, but this got Parlor Fan on board. Thank you, Parlor Fan. This is the real shit. We're talking about the real shit now. But that's the thing, though, is that there's lunatics that are involved in these conspiracy movements, and they want that. They want that because they want anyone asking these questions to be lumped in with this group of like conspiracy crazies. I think the questions we should be asking about this are the whole, like, you know, the memo about bin Laden determined to attack the US. You look at bin Laden's funding and training in the 80s, the ties to the Saudi royal family and Mossad, and the fact that like they needed this attack to happen in order to justify the next 20 years of expanding the national security establishment, unlimited funding for these weapons contracts, going into Iraq, which is one of the main things that these national security guys wanted to do. They all of a sudden had an excuse to do everything. So I don't think it's quite as simple as like, you know, the CIA calling up bin Laden being like, do 9/11 now, sir. It's time to do 9/11. I don't think that happened. But I mean, what more connections do you want? Like, yeah, how many more connections does there have to be with the United States national security establishment and the weapons contractors before you start being like, okay, there's too many connections for this to be just completely random? You know what I mean? So I think at the bare minimum, they knew that the attack was coming, and there was elements within the intelligence community, because there was people that were trying to do stuff about this. There was people that were trying to like alert people to the danger of this, but there's also a force inside the intelligence community that ensured that nothing would happen. And there's a number of weird things about the day, about jet fighters not being able to get launched. There's all kinds of weird things that happened on the day. And for me, it's just about it's like a motive. It's like you see that there's a motive to ensure that attack happens, because people profited immensely from this. And like you point out the connection with the end of the Cold War with September 11th. And it's like, you know, that was the fucking September 11th, according to these like evil intelligence community guys and weapons manufacturers, the best thing to ever happen to them. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't think George Bush is on the phone with bin Laden telling him to do 9/11 and stuff like that. I think that's a very reductive way of pushing it. I don't really believe the stuff about the buildings getting detonated and all the weird conspiracies about holograms and all that bullshit. That to me is like overlooking the very simple explanation, the very simple storyline that emerges from this. Maybe there's some stuff with the building. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But to me, it's not that important. But I do think that we should at least be able to ask questions about, were these attacks allowed to happen? What are the connections between the intelligence community and bin Laden and all these guys? The Mujahideen and the funding in the 80s that they funded these Afghanistan freedom fighters, as they were called in the press. And they wanted a new Pearl Harbor. You know what I mean? It's like, it's quite a simple storyline that emerges when you start thinking about this. And you don't really need to go, who at that point, who cares if it was a controlled demolition or whatever? It's like, it doesn't really matter. Nearly all the Saudi hijackers, and the way that the day after, with all the airlines shut down, they took all these Saudi nationals and flew them out of the country. I mean, come on. That's the kind of thing that I mean. Like, how many more connections do you need? How many more connections do you need to draw between the 9/11 hijackers and the United States intelligence community before you start to be like, okay, well, something was up with this? And when you look at who profited from it, it's another Big Lebowski thing. You look to the person who will benefit, right? Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. That's kind of my thing. I got robbed in 9/11 truth. But this is what I mean, though, is there's a direct connection between this Operation Paperclip stuff, Operation Paperclip in the post-war period, Korea, Vietnam, JFK assassination, Vietnam escalates into South America, Operation Condor, into the Middle East, Afghanistan in the 80s, the Mujahideen, the end of the Cold War, 9/11. There's a direct timeline, and all these things are connected, whether you like it or not. You don't have to like it. You don't even have to agree, but you do have to admit that these things, there is a very specific timeline that we can look at with this. The main takeaway is, what would make you think that the CIA wouldn't do this? Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that like weird 9/11 truthers have pointed to, the fact that there were plans in the past, like to frame like Cuban dissidents. What was the name of the operation that they wanted to do? They wanted to do this operation to like do bombings in Miami Beach and blame it on Castro. Like they've had plans to do this kind of stuff that we know of. Like this is like declassified stuff. So it's like, yeah, why wouldn't they do it? They've literally planned to do this exact kind of stuff before. And that's what I mean. That's kind of where I stand on this. I don't think they directly, Northwoods. I don't think they directly did these attacks. I do think they let them happen. And I do think they let them happen for a specific reason. And all the same people that have been benefiting from United States foreign policy since Operation Paperclip all just continued to benefit. And it was they fired up that money printing machine once again. And all the same people were all benefiting from it. All these weapons contractors, all these intelligence community guys. It's all the same people that are always benefiting from this stuff. Operation Northwoods, a proposed false flag operation against the Cuban government that originated within the United States Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government in '62. The proposals called for the Central Intelligence Agency or other U.S. government operatives to both stage and actually commit acts of terrorism against American military and civilian targets, blaming them on the Cuban government and using it to justify a war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees in the high seas, hijacking planes to be shot down or given the appearance of being shot down. So let's just look at that one more time. I just want to make sure I totally understand this. Let's zoom in even more here. The possibilities detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes to be shot down or given the appearance of being shot down, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. The proposals were rejected by President John F. Kennedy. Huh. Doesn't that make you say, huh? Isn't that kind of a chin scratcher, some of this stuff? And this is what I mean about the 9/11 stuff, is that it's been very, very intentionally and deliberately have they put anyone who asks these kinds of questions into this camp of like psycho 9/11 truthers. Extremely deliberately. Because when you start actually asking these questions, some of this stuff starts to make a lot of sense. Al-Qaeda's infamy started when they blew up a U.S. destroyer and an embassy. That's exactly right, comrade. Social distancing. The USS Cole. Wasn't it? Wasn't it the Cole? The USS Cole bombing was a suicide attack by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda against the USS Cole, a guided missile destroyer of the United States Navy, on 12th October 2000, while she was being refueled in Yemen's Aden Harbor. 17 U.S. Navy sailors killed, 37 injured. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the attack against the United States. A U.S. judge has held Sudan liable for the attack, while another has released over $13 million in Sudanese frozen assets to the relatives of those killed. Huh. What a crazy coincidence. What a crazy coincidence. And what happens 1 year later? 12th October 2000. What happens 11 months later on the dot? 11 months later on the dot. There's another such incident, isn't there? Which gets the whole country on board. Bush was very unpopular. The country was divided. Bush didn't even win the fucking election. They stole the election. I wonder who was responsible for that, by the way. They stole the election. Bush is super unpopular. And exactly 11 months after this USS Cole bombing, what happens? And what's the result? Who benefits from that? When George Bush was sitting in front of that second grade class reading to them, his chief of staff walked up to him and whispered in his ear, "Sir, you just did 9/11." He went, "Yeah." So I don't know. If you think it's over the line to discuss this stuff and to just like let's be serious here. It's been 20 fucking years. I think we're allowed now to start asking some questions about this. Look, folks, being JFK pilled, that's basically normie shit now. You want to be edgy, it's time to get 9/11 pilled. And after that, maybe you can reach the pinnacle of pilling. That's right. DPRK pilled. This is what I'm doing on this channel. One person at a time. I don't know. I would like to believe there's someone from the Majority Report raid still hanging around that's starting to be like, oh man, this is kind of messed up. Some of this stuff is kind of, maybe we start asking these questions. But that's what I mean. They've made it so it's been impossible to question this narrative. For 20 years now. You just can't question it. And I think now it's 20 fucking years. I think it's time we can start asking critical questions about September 11th. Who benefited from it? Who allowed it to happen? What were the results? Are we still living with the results? I think we should be able to ask these questions without being dismissed as being kooks and crazies and conspiracy theorists. Were you aware that Jim Morrison, Frank Zappa, Papa John Williams, Phillips, and David Crosby were all children of high-ranking members of the American military, or that the Los Angeles neighborhood of Laurel Canyon, one time home to all of the above, was also the location of the Air Force's 1352nd Photographic Group? I was not aware of that. We have talked about like Hollywood and stuff though, right? Hollywood, how in the 70s Hollywood was often very critical of the intelligence community and the CIA, and often depicted them as being like the bad guys. And then when the CIA started getting involved in Hollywood and funding these productions, lo and behold, they kind of started turning into like the good guys of these movies. That led us into the 80s, of the big 80s movies of Rambo 3 and all that big Reagan era pro-America. We love the troops, we love the CIA stuff. Another weird coincidence. Another weird coincidence. I suggest listening to last podcast on the Left's 9/11 episode, and some questions may be answered. They showed Cheney didn't make it happen, but knew and allowed it so they could make cash from a forever war. There was intel about it on Bush's desk within weeks before it happening. Let's put a pin in the 9/11 stuff. I wanted to make it because there's a whether you like it or not, there's a connection between Operation Paperclip in the post-war period all the way to September 11th. You can, maybe it's bullshit, maybe it's just it's one of those examples of finding a pattern when there's nothing there. Maybe it's that. But you can absolutely make a connection, make a very, very clear timeline from the end of World War II, Paperclip, all the way to today. That's why I think it's important to talk about this when we're talking about Paperclip. Let's put a pin in this for now. When it's on actual September 11th, I do intend to do a September 11th stream, and we're going to be revisiting all of this shit. I'm going to do a dedicated September 11th stream. And you want to talk about subversive? I tell people this is the world's most subversive stream. This is not a game. It's not just a tagline. On September 11th, we're gonna get extremely subversive with this, and we're gonna do a dedicated 9/11 stream, and we're gonna explore all of these very real connections. It's funny how the American state criticizes communist countries for having state propaganda when Hollywood is just the same thing with an extra level of separation. The media companies. Yeah, that's what I mean. I've talked about this often. We think that we live in this society with no propaganda because there's a degree of separation between the state and these huge media companies. Or not just the companies that make movies, but the companies that make news and newspapers. And that's what it's funny to me when you have American like social democrat Twitch streamers who are like, no, in America, there's no propaganda. I'm impervious to propaganda. I'm immune to propaganda. I would know. I'm a smart, critical thinking individual. I would understand when I'm being propagandized to. And it's just like, what these people don't understand is you live in the most advanced, sophisticated propaganda machine ever constructed in human history. And you grew up, and I'm including myself in this, you grew up completely inundated with this every moment of your life at all times. So not only is it not like a non-propagandized society, it is the most heavily propagandized society in the history of the entire world. So much propaganda, parents are addicted to MSNBC, cheering on Kamala for literally doing nothing. And hey, you know who fucking funds the media companies? It's not the state. It's not the US government. It's the weapons manufacturers, though, isn't it? It's the national security establishment. They fund CNN and MSNBC, the arms manufacturers. Don't they? The same people who have been profiting from all this stuff for decades and decades. They own all the media companies. I take no pleasure in reporting this, believe me. Amazon is making moves to acquire global news. Yeah. They also have connections with the CIA and the NSA, don't they? With the technology that they've been creating for like facial recognition and all this stuff. And they're working with the CIA to make shows like the fucking Office Gym show. What a coincidence. What a crazy coincidence. And you know the ultimate example of the evils of Amazon. Do you think it's normal that Rob Rousseau doesn't have a check mark on Twitch? I've not been given the Twitch partnership opportunity. Oh, what a crazy coincidence. What another coincidence. Even though I have 80,000 followers on Twitter, I have a good solid average of viewers and subscribers. And lo and behold, I'm still being denied that partnership. What a coincidence.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hey, Mr. Fancy Pants, thanks so much. Due to the good news, we finally got our stimulus check. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the tier 1 sub. I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Fancy Pants. Yeah, Gene Park is great at the Washington Post. And when I want to talk about these media companies being evil and owned by the weapons manufacturers, it's not that there's good people that aren't involved in these, don't work for these companies. There's plenty of great journalists that work for these companies. But ultimately, there's a limit. In our so-called free speech discourse, there's a limit in how far that discourse is allowed to go. And this is where Chomsky is very valuable, because Chomsky is very good at pointing this stuff out. We have a lively discourse within these bounds that are being set. And you can have all kinds of people that have different views and different disagreements within these confines, but they are confines that you can't, certain viewpoints aren't being articulated within these confines. And when someone does go beyond these confines and starts asking some of these questions, someone like Noam Chomsky, for example, someone like Norman Finkelstein, someone like Michael Parenti in the 80s, do you see them on CNN? Do you see them are they part of the marketplace of ideas? Are they getting op-ed space in the Washington Post? Are they getting invited to be talking heads on CNN? No, they're not. Yeah, that's why Cenk didn't work out with MSNBC. That's right. That's why he had to leave. And even he is someone that I think has been kind of shifted just by through his association, even this peripheral association with that kind of crew.
Open Chomsky style.
That's what I mean. You can try and cancel Chomsky for being anti-communist, for being like a left anti-communist. You know, Michael Parenti he went pretty hard at Chomsky for a lot of this stuff. But a lot of the stuff that Chomsky talks about in terms of the way the discourse works is really, really valuable to understand. And I think for someone like me, helped get me starting thinking about these concepts, which I was then able to move past. I think that we all have to, Chomsky can kind of open that door for us, but I think then we need to walk through the door and continue rather than stopping where he is. You know what I mean? And Chomsky, when he talks about this kind of discourse and the way that the way people are propagandized and the way language is used to like obfuscate a lot of stuff, and the way, that famous interview, I always reference this. If you believe something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting. That gives the whole game away. That's the whole media game. And as much as you can criticize Chomsky for a lot of stuff, but that is very, very valuable, that kind of analysis. Okay, so this was like a hour-long... I've literally watched this video that I wanted to watch for like 1 minute. This is like an hour-long sidebar. The Danny Green Holocaust tweet was fucking hilarious. No, I had to do it one time. Hashtag Holocaust. That's right. This really is, though, why I think learning about Operation Paperclip is so vital, though. Because this is the foundation. Post-World War II, there was an opportunity to create a whole new world with new borders, new maps. And these were the people that were like driving these decisions. And the choices that were made in the post-war period, beginning with Operation Paperclip, laid the foundation for the world that we're all still living in today. It's the same people still in power. It's the same people making these decisions. It's the same families and the same people profiting from it. We simply had too many viewers. I hope if there's some more like Majority Report, more normie types. I hope some of you stuck around and you've been enjoying this conspiracy corner shit. Let's grow up, though. It's been 20 years since 9/11. We should be able to start asking these questions. I'm sorry. Who benefits from just being able to be like, nope, there's only one story that happened and it was a complete accident. Nothing could be done and we'd never talk about it again. Let's never talk about it. If you even question this narrative, one thing, you're this loon, you're a crazy person, you're like an Alex Jones type.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hey, Christo. Thanks for joining and thanks for subscribing at Tier 1. Christo Ivalis, everyone. My friend. But that's what I mean, though. Talking about that. Christo's going to show up and be like, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? Rob's doing crazy conspiracy stuff now. But that's what I mean. Who benefits from just not being able to ask any questions about that, about any of these incidents, including 9/11? Who benefits? No crazier than your Twitter stuff. Thank you, Christo. Who benefits from being like, no, never question this narrative. Don't question it. You're a loon. You're a crazy loon. You're like Alex Jones. If you even ask one question, who's benefiting from that? Well, it's all the same people that profited immensely from taking advantage of this situation, wasn't it? Okay. Let's continue this paperclip lecture, though. Can we make it through the entire hour? I doubt it, because I've been talking for now like 90 minutes from taking a break from this. But let's try and continue.
Nearby at Nordhausen was the Buchenwald concentration camp. And when I traveled to Germany to research the book, this sign really came across to me as really remarkable and something I thought about often. It says Jedem das Seine. It's an old German proverb, and it means, does everyone get what they deserve? And I often wondered as I was researching and reporting this question, exactly that. The scientists were taken to this castle. Ironically, this had been one of Göring's Luftwaffe headquarters. It's outside Frankfurt. And when I went there also to speak to the old-time caretaker. He had lots of stories, which I write in the book, about what it was like when the U.S. military took over and set up all the scientists that we were collecting throughout the ruins of the Reich. We set them up in this facility, and we began to interview them. These are a number of the scientists who were in, it was called Dustbin, a little humor by the Allies there.
9/11 conspiracies are cute and all, but you haven't really matured as a human until you're ready to embrace ancient astronaut theory. I used to think about that kind of stuff a lot, ancient astronaut theory. I think I used to be a subscriber to that theory. Now I guess I just don't care. I don't really care that much about like the origins of humanity. It doesn't really apply anything to like what our modern reality, whether we're just like an accident, just this evolutionary accident, which is I guess what the theory of that evolutionary biologists have, even though they know, like even the most studied evolutionary biologists will note that there's like severe gaps in this theory with stuff that they can't explain. I guess it just doesn't matter all that much to me, like what those gaps are about. Yeah, maybe ancient astronauts came and did biological experiments to create the human race. Sure, you know, does that really affect anything that we're currently dealing with? Not really. You know, it's kind of fun to think about. I guess it just doesn't matter to me that much. You know what I mean? Find out when you die, or don't.
But these are some of the scientists who were kept there. One of the scientists we couldn't find at first was Dr. Ambrose. Ambrose, I think, is probably the most nefarious character that I write about in the book, and I'm going to tell you briefly why. Ambrose was Hitler's favorite chemist, and I don't say that lightly. I found a document in the National Archives that I don't believe had ever been reported before. It shows an award that Ambrose was given by Hitler of 1 million Reichsmarks. And the reason that Ambrose was given that was because he
invented sarin gas. It's interesting too. I just saw a news story about, I believe Kentucky is a state in the US that wants to start manufacturing sarin gas as well to execute prisoners. Zyklon B.
Co-invented sarin gas. The A in sarin stands for Ambrose. But he also invented synthetic rubber for the Reich. And this was a very big deal to Hitler. Tanks need treads, aircraft need tires. Hitler knew the Reich was running out of rubber. And so when Ambrose invented rubber, the Fuhrer bestowed him with favor in the form of this giant financial reward. Ambrose was also put in charge of a slave labor factory, none other than...
This is interesting too, Parlor fan. So many conspiracy theories are ultimately just about Jewish people, which sucks for me as a Jew. Even the flat earth conspiracy theory is, in the end, just about Jewish people. And it's like, how? This is interesting too. I think something similar has happened there in the same way that 9/11 conspiracy theories get shunted off into this wacko conspiracy theory world and stuff. And I think anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are part of that as well. Like the whole thing about Jews controlling the media, which is obviously anti-Semitic. It's an anti-Semitic trope, and it's extremely anti-Semitic to suggest that. But like we were just talking about, we should talk about who owns the media. Who does own the media, because that's extremely important in influencing public opinion about stuff. But it's not the Jews. It's not the Jews that control the media. It's the fucking capitalists. It's the weapons manufacturers. The banks. These people are not all Jewish at all. They're fucking monstrous nihilists. And many of the people who control the media don't even like Jews. So I think it's the same way. It's kind of, I feel like these conversations have been deliberately manipulated in this way. You start questioning who controls the media, and everyone's like, "Oh, it sounds like you're talking about these Jewish conspiracy theories, these these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories." But that's what it is. It's like it's not true. The Jews don't control the media. The weapons manufacturers do. The capitalists do. But how do they control the shape of the earth? That I don't know. That I'm not sure about. Well, part of that, I think, Parlor Fan, is that when you dig into the flat earth stuff, at the end of the day, it's like a Christian fundamentalist thing, because they want to believe that the version of earth in the Bible, where the earth is the center of the universe, that's kind of what that's about. So I guess, if I had to guess, I haven't delved into this too much, but if I had to guess, the anti-Semitic element of that is like Jews would be controlling the narrative to hide the fact that the earth is flat from people, because if people knew the earth was flat, they would know that the Christian Bible is real. So the conspiracy is that like Jewish people are like preventing people from uncovering the truth about our world, which is that it was created by like the Christian, evangelical Christian God and everything. Would that be it, I guess? The Jewish conspiracy theory, based on what I've learned, all started after the French Revolution, because it was the only thing that those who supported the ruling class that made sense for why the revolution was successful. The Jews planned it, for instance. Well, and part of it too is just a complete natural result of the way a lot of these industries worked. Like, there's a reason that Jewish people are overrepresented in like the finance industry or in these banks, for instance. It's not because there's this big conspiracy. It's just because for many years, Christian people didn't participate in these industries because it was against their religion. So Jewish people were like the ones that were responsible for like money lending and this kind of commerce. And that's why it's a completely like natural result of the way that these kind of industries just formed initially. And it's not because there's a big conspiracy. There's a perfectly reasonable historical explanation for why these conspiracies do start. And that's it. It's like, it's not that it's when you look into banking now, of course it's not all Jewish people, because now this is not an issue anymore. Now anyone can get involved in these industries. For like centuries though, this was not the case. Let me Google this. What is the connection between Jews and flat earth? My internet history, because the stream specifically should land me in prison. This is the stuff I get uncomfortable talking about it, because this, even talking about it, I feel uncomfortable and like I'm on the edge of saying some offensive shit, which I hope I'm not doing. The whole point that I'm trying to make is that these false anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, I think, are used as a way to obfuscate the real conspiracy. And there would be real people that are pulling the strings who are not Jews. It's not the Jews that are controlling the media and controlling the banks and the arms manufacturing industry and stuff like that. It's not. It is not. To be 100% clear. But anti-Semitic, like actual anti-Semites and racists, have been kind of brought up to believe these conspiracies that is what's happening. Whew. Okay, I'm actually getting a little uncomfortable talking about this stuff now. It's getting a little too subversive, I think. I'm going to continue this lecture now before we go any further down this subject.
And at Auschwitz. And this is an Allied intelligence photo of the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex in June of 1944. It's a little hard to interpret to the naked eye, but because it's from so high up, but you see there's Auschwitz up there, it's labeled, there's Birkenau, and down on the bottom you can just barely see, it says Auschwitz III Buna. Buna is... Okay, sorry. Back to the safe space of Operation Paperclip. But this stuff should permanently disprove this shit, right? Because it's not that the Jews are controlling any of these big things. They literally brought in Nazis and anti-Semites to do it. It's literally it's the opposite. The people that were like impacted, like creating this whole modern geopolitical reality, are anti-Semites and Nazis. So, I mean, this stuff should prove conclusively that there isn't some Jewish conspiracy, because it's like literally the people that hate the Jews the most and create these conspiracies themselves are the ones that have been benefited the most from this shit. Just to be 100% clear, if anyone's watching this and is like, whoa, let's use this crazy guy.
I want to be 100% clear about this.
Is the name for synthetic rubber. And this was where Ambrose was manager. And slaves who were spared the gas chamber, some of whom I interview for the book, were sent to Buna to work. Most of them were worked to death. Of all the photographs that I found on my research and reporting, none bothered me to the degree that this one did. It was not the bodies stacked like cordwood.
Hello, Comrade Butchla. Welcome.
That we all have seen and have horrified us, but rather it was this, and it's because of what that sign says. It says Company Sporting Club IG Auschwitz. And those are two of Otto Ambrose's colleagues fencing. So after a day in the laboratory, they would go for sport and fence. And as it was explained to me by the academics at the Fritz Bauer Institute who allowed me to publish this photograph, they told me that this sporting event would take place in the afternoons well within the sight of the 3 large chimneys of the death camp's crematoria. That Otto Ambrose became part of Paperclip is horrifying. Dr. Bloma, captured by the Allies, begins talking. He's the first high-ranking member of the Third Reich, also close to Hitler. He wore the golden party badge, which means he had favor from the Fuhrer. And he begins cooperating with the Allies and tells them about atrocities, mass sterilization, and gassing of Jews. There's a tug of war going on. One group of scientists is extremely interested in Dr. Blum. He's in charge of Hitler's biological weapons program. He's been working on a bubonic plague weapon. But there's a tug of war going on because here you have Dr. Leopold Alexander, who has been sent to Germany not to try to find scientists, interrogate them, find out their knowledge, and decide whether or not they should be part of Operation Paperclip, but rather to look for men, specifically science, specifically doctors, who might be tried at the Nuremberg war crimes trials. At the same time, you have Harry Armstrong, later the second Surgeon General of the Third Reich. Armstrong is interested in enhancing pilot performance in the United States. The next war will involve pilots who fly high, fast, and far. And the Reich, Harry Armstrong knows, is far advanced in pilot physiology at this point than the U.S. Army Air Forces, and he wants those German doctors. He teams up with Dr. Hubertus Strughold, known as the father of space medicine.
That's really interesting there, Comrade Social Distancing. I would like to dig into that further.
We'll talk about Strughold a little bit later on. Strughold was the top man in Luftwaffe medicine. When I was doing an interview recently, someone said, well, could people that were this high up not have known? And the best analogy I can give you is imagine being a hedge fund manager today and trying to say that you're not interested in capitalism. If you were to rise to the top of your field in the Third Reich, you had knowledge of things, and you had a commitment to an ideology that is almost impossible, in my estimation, to say that you didn't know.
It's not almost impossible. It's 100% impossible. Does anyone believe that seriously? Oh, they just had no idea. These weren't fucking rank and file prison guards and bureaucrats. Literally, they're the top brass of the Third Reich. Oh, they didn't even know. Werner von Braun, that's what the song says, remember, is apolitical. He doesn't even have an ideology. He's kind of just does whatever. He just wants to make his rockets and go up into space. He doesn't even care. You bullshit. They absolutely knew. Of course they knew. Von Braun knew about the camps. He toured the camps. They fucking knew. Not only did they know, this was their ideology. This is what they believed in. Von Braun hand-selected his laborers that would die. This is what they believed in. This is what they devoted their whole lives to, all their careers to. didn't know. That's the thing. The noble Nazi myth was such a centerpiece of this propaganda. I knew we were doing bad stuff, but didn't know to what extent or measure. Yeah, unbelievable horse shit. They fucking knew in the United States before the war was happening. They knew what was going on. And Canada. We knew exactly what was going on. They were persecuting Jewish people and communists and homosexuals and Romani people and other undesirables. We knew this. And we did not care. We turned away boats of Jewish refugees that were being very clear about what was happening. The UK did have concentration camps before the war. They had concentration camps in Africa, and I think there was a concentration camp in the UK, although I don't have the specific details of that in front of me. But like, the idea that the Nazis didn't know, of course they knew. That was a big part of their ideology. Not only did they know, we knew full well as well, and we agreed. The UK segregated Jews in the shelters. That's right. The fucking insane part that America didn't know, our soldiers just stumbled upon concentration camps and were shocked. Well, that's the thing. I'm sure many of the soldiers didn't know, but the people in the high levels of the government and the military, they knew. Starting to think we're the bad guys. Comrade Bachla. This is kind of what I've been trying to talk about the last couple of... Well, it's what I talk about often on this stream, but specifically the last couple of days, because it's come up in this dramatic way online. We are the baddies. This is what the Social Democrats and the liberals can't accept. They can't wrap their minds around this. As far as they're able to go is like, oh, we made mistakes. America did some bad stuff. Overall, it's good. And they can't wrap their minds around the fact that it's like, no, it's not good. We're the bad guys of history. The Nazis were just a small blip. The Nazis were trying to do what we were doing, but even better. And we had to take care of them, and then we went right back to doing the exact same shit. My grandpa, fleeing anti-Semitism, lied on his papers when he emigrated from Lithuania to the US, so he wouldn't be included in adult quotas and be turned back. I'm proud of my illegal roots. That's cool, Kenzo. That is cool. And listen, in the post-war period, and Esha from Historically talks about this. This is interesting too. In the post-war period, when you're accepting immigrants and refugees, and you ban socialists and communists from emigrating, who are you bringing into the country? Who are you bringing into the country in the post-war period if you're banning communists and socialists and trade unionists? Who's immigrating in that case? I wonder. This is why, and I saw this connection as well, in Canada, one of the primary socialist newspapers prior to the war was written in Ukrainian. After the war, we ended up with SS monuments. Is that a coincidence? When I get my second shot, I'm going to travel Canada and find out where the Ukrainian Nazis went and where their families are. Yeah, we talked to Chrystia Freeland. She might have some answers on that. Maybe we should interview her. We should get her on the stream and ask her some of these questions. She'd be happy to tell us this. Okay, let's continue this. Man, it is true, though, that when you start pulling at these threads, and it becomes very difficult to start to ignore these things you find. The only thing I hate more than Illinois Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis. But of course, our foreign policy, we must support Ukraine. We must support the Ukraine. It's so important. Russia. We have to stop Russia and the Crimean Peninsula. Everything that's old is new again. We were doing the Crimean War in the mid-19th century. We're still talking about it. We must oppose Russia and Crimea. We must protect the Ukraine. And it's the same people making these same foreign policy decisions, isn't it?
Nevertheless, Harry Armstrong and Hubertus Strughold create a partnership in Germany, and they hire these men. This photograph, never published before. Richard Kuhn is in the center, a very famous Nobel Prize-winning chemist, and many other scientists who would come to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip to work in Texas. But before that happened, there was a knock on the door in the institute where they were all set up to work in Germany before their passage to the United States could be arranged. And that was from, as I told you, Dr. Leopold Alexander. He wanted these three for war crimes, as he wanted Dr. Theodore Benziger. Dr. Theodore Benziger, when I read about his obituary in the New York Times, published in 1999, when Benziger was 94, the
Nice,
New York
long,
Times
happy life.
lauded his long career for the U.S. Navy as a doctor. It talked about how he invented the ear thermometer, but it left out entirely that Dr. Theodore Benziger was part of a small group of doctors that worked with Himmler. And when Himmler would show films of medical murder experiments at the Reich Air Ministry, he had Dr. Theodore Benziger do the introductions. So this is this kind of whitewashing I found astonishing. And even more troubling when I
The
looked...
supposedly liberal New York Times that's also been 100% on board with every single foreign intervention and every single coup that the national security establishment wanted to do for the last several decades. Eulogizing this positive eulogy for this Nazi guy.
Looked deep into the Nuremberg files, I found out that Dr. Theodore Benziger was on the initial list to be tried at the doctor's trial. And yet, mysteriously, just 3 weeks before trial, he was released into custody of Harry Armstrong of the U.S. Army Air Forces, and he was on his way to the United States.
Damn, what a coincidence. He
Part
sure
of
got
Dr.
lucky.
Alexander's role was to find witnesses, to find the few survivors of those horrific concentration camp medical experiments and put them on trial. So we had the doctor's trial. There you see Dr. Bloma in the center. He would be acquitted and he would later become part of Paperclip. And there you see Dr. Alexander with a witness who comes into the story later at the Nuremberg doctor's trial. This is one of the doctors. You know, someone once asked me, did any of the doctors know each other? And they absolutely did. Dr. Alexander, part of the reason why he was chosen to be the chief medical expert for the Nuremberg trials was that he had grown up in Vienna and he left when the Nazis took power. So he was a fluent German speaker, and he was astonished to figure out at the doctor's trial that he was in the same medical class with Dr. Biegelbach. Karl Hollenreiner, one of the few survivors of those experiments. I tell this story in the book, but there's so many moments that I came across that are just lost to history. I couldn't believe that I had never heard of them, and they seemed to not have been written about anywhere. Karl Hollenreiner was the subject of the saltwater experiments, and I won't give you the details because they're gruesome. You can read some of them in the book. But Hollenreiner was so outraged at Biegelbach, who had performed those experiments on him. He came into the Nuremberg trials with a dagger hidden in his pocket. And And while he was on the witness stand, he leapt off the stand and he tried to stab Biegelbach. And one of the Nuremberg judges was so upset with him because he said, "We are here to show what democracy is all about," that he sent poor Karl Hollenreiner back into the prison with the Nazi doctors. Dr. Walter Schreiber, hold that thought. He was absent from the doctor's trial. He'd been captured by the Soviets. Jumping over...
I am tempted to read about these saltwater experiments. It sounds horrifying, though. We probably shouldn't even talk about that, right? I literally Googled it, saw your comment, and closed the tab without reading. And I will just make the connection again. It's not just about World War II and post-World War II. It's about prior to the war as well. The way that the Nazis were inspired by Manifest Destiny. Right? Lebensbraum. They were inspired by Manifest Destiny, and in Canada, at these Indian hospitals, they were doing this kind of human experimentation shit as well. And in the residential schools. It's not just about taking the Nazis after World War II and absorbing them into your country and then doing evil shit after. It's we were ideologically aligned with them prior to the war. There is no Nazi party without the influence of the West, both just in our genocide of indigenous peoples and also in creating the exact conditions necessary after World War I to have Hitler and the Nazis become popular. Tuskegee experiment started in 1932. This is not just about post World War II. This is about an ideological continuity from the foundation of these nations all the way to today. And the Nazis are a part of that legacy. When the Soviet Union liberated Nazi concentration camps, they released the gay prisoners, but when the Western Allies liberated camps, they made sure the gay prisoners were transferred to ordinary prisons because they actually agreed with the Nazis that gay equals bad. Yeah, like as we pointed out, a lot of the groups that we knew for a fact were being persecuted in these camps. We knew about this. We just didn't care. I think for a lot of the ruling class of Canada and the United States, they were kind of like, hey, damn, maybe we could be doing stuff in that stuff here. Maybe these Nazis have something right here. And that's kind of what I think about how this has shifted in the last couple of decades, because fascism became very unpopular during this period. And they kind of had to pretend that it wasn't there. They kind of had to pretend that even though that they were absorbing these people, they were carrying across the same ideological project, but they had to pretend that it was different. And that's why we see, I think, the embrace of like affirmative action and civil rights and this shit like that and gay rights, and how these things have kind of been embraced and are used as examples to show how we live in this very different society. It's not fascism because we support this kind of inclusivity, you know? But I think in many ways this is like a smokescreen. Yeah, it's about optics. That's right. But, okay, here's an interesting connection as well, right? You have the early 60s, you have the JFK assassination, Vietnam, all that stuff. That also became very unpopular as well. And I think that was part of LBJ's deal when Lyndon Johnson became president after this military coup or intelligence community coup. Lyndon Johnson becomes president. Fucking MLK gets assassinated. Malcolm X. There's all these wave of radical black activists that are assassinated, and then it's like, okay, we'll sign the Civil Rights Act. Okay. And that shows how enlightened we are as a society and how we're moving past all this racism and stuff. And then what began almost immediately after the passage of the Civil Rights Act? The war on drugs. And why did they start the war on drugs? Well, they started the war on drugs specifically to target black communities and to mass incarcerate black and brown people who have been predominantly the victims of these drug laws, which, as we all know, have never applied equally to white people. So we're so enlightened. We have no slavery anymore. We have no Jim Crow anymore. We passed the Civil Rights Act. We did all these positive things. We've got black people on TV shows. We've got black people in commercials. We have got black athletes and sports stars and pop stars. But we're going to do this war on drugs and mass incarcerate millions of black and brown people and do forced labor. We're going to put them with these spurious drug allegations and drug laws, destroy entire communities, and get cheap labor for these big companies. To target black communities and hippies. Yeah, that's a good, to be clear. Yeah, it was, I think black and brown people were the number one target of these laws, but also politically subversive people as well. But I think black and brown people were the number one target, for sure. Fred Hampton as well, I should include in that wave of political assassinations. Maybe that's just another coincidence. Maybe the timing of that is just a little coincidence. Oh, except when, Nixon was so unpopular. Nixon gets overthrown. Nixon is forced to resign. Jimmy Carter takes over. We saw his different views of foreign policy and the way he tried to liberalize some of these institutions. And then the national security establishment, the intelligence community, including George W. Bush, put their fingers on the scale to ensure Reagan gets in the 80s. And then Reagan ramps up all the mass incarceration, and then really goes and just destroys the last vestiges of whatever social democracy was left and organized labor. What a crazy coincidence. What a crazy coincidence, isn't it? All kinds of crazy coincidences when you start pulling at these threads. Yeah, Reagan was an empty figurehead. That was 12 years of H.W. Bush's presidency. Well, I mean, it's not like he was like a professional actor or anything. Remember the connections to Hollywood and the CIA and that stuff? It's not like Reagan was like a professional actor who could fill that role or anything, right? I haven't looked too much into his past, before he got into politics. It's not like he was like a Hollywood movie star or anything like that. Just someone that could throw into that role, charismatic guy. I haven't read one thing about this, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't it's not like this guy was just a professional actor. Just some unknown dude. That must just be another one of these coincidences. All kinds of coincidences you start noticing when you start tugging at these threads. Very, very strange stuff.